So with the NBA offseason pretty much wrapped up, I would not be surprised if a couple moves, trickle in right before training camp starts, but majority of rosters are set. So I want to talk about the teams I find the most fascinating in the NBA right now. The teams I can't really, put my finger on exactly what they're going to be. And I want to start with the Golden State Warriors because we all just kind of assumed that there was another move coming and it might still happen, but whether it was Lowry marketing or whatever, right? We all kind of assumed the move was on the way, but it didn't happen. And I could speak for myself, but I do believe a lot of people probably agree with what I'm about to say, that this roster is set up very nicely if they had a second star. But what if the second star is already on the roster? What if Kuminga is that second star? Now, I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but I don't think we're giving it enough credit, for the chances it might actually happen. There's a real world where Kuminga is averaging 24 points and 8 boards next year, and Pod is putting up 14 points and 7 boards and 6 assists. I can really see that happening. The question is, what does that really mean? I'm not sure. I could envision this team finishing anywhere from 4 to 11 in the West because the West is that crazy. But I also look at the other side of it and say if Kuminga is performing that well, the trade value goes through the roof, right? This summer, it was surprising to a lot of people that a lot of teams didn't want Kuminga. They actually viewed it as kind of a negative if they have to pay him. But if the Warriors pay him before the year begins and he blossoms and all of a sudden it looks like a good deal, all of a sudden you have a great trade chip. Now, I'm not sure the exact dates on how soon he would be able to be traded after signing that extension. I don't believe that's going to happen anyway. If Kuminga's balling out, they're going to keep Kuminga unless they can trade him for, one of the best players in the NBA, which is probably not going to happen. But when we're talking about this team, I don't think people are taking into account the fact that Kuminga could very well end up being the second best player on a playoff team. I don't think it's that far-fetched, considering what he did last year when he was given the opportunity. And no one's really accounting for how good Pods might actually be. I think there's a world, again, where he's averaging 14, 15 points per game, 8 boards, 5 assists. I project him as that type of player. Now, will it happen next year? Maybe not, but Pods is going to be very good. Kuminga is going to be very good, but how much will it matter, this upcoming season? I'm not sure. But beyond those two guys, they also have two other really good young players in Moses Moody and Trayce Jackson-Davis. Now, Moses Moody, I'm not sure how many minutes he's going to get, but I bring that up because Moses Moody could be another trade chip. I think there's a lot of teams around the league that really like Moses Moody, that really feel like Steve Kerr is kind of messing up that situation, and he might have real trade value. And then you have Looney and GP2 as other real trade chips. So even if you don't like this team right now, I'm not sure they can make a huge move, but I can see them making a mid-sized move that can really shake things up. Think of someone like Bobby Portis. I could for sure see a world where there's a trade centered around Moses Moody, a first-round pick, and Kevon Looney for Bobby Portis. Bucks fans, you probably feel like that's no way that's happening. I understand, and we're going to talk about the Bucks right now. But for the Warriors, you don't really need Moody, Buddy Hield, Pods, DeAnthony Melton, and GP2. You also probably don't need to have Kuminga, Draymond, Looney, Trayce Jackson-Davis, Kyle Anderson, all in the front court, not really spacing the floor. That's why I went to Bobby Portis immediately. Now, again, I feel like Moody is a player that a lot of teams around the league probably value more than it seems like the Warriors value him. But let's move on to the Milwaukee Bucks, and we're going to start with Bobby Portis because I just brought up Bobby Portis. So the Bucks may be the team with the most pressure on them in the NBA. When I say pressure on the Bucks, I'm really talking about the Bucks as an organization, not really Giannis in particular. But we have Dame now in his mid-30s. You have Middleton in his mid-30s coming off double ankle surgery. You have Brook Lopez, I don't know, is he 36, 37? I'm not sure. And they don't really have any young prospects that you feel great about. I mean, I like MarJon Beauchamp. Not projecting him as anything great, could happen. Just saying, not projecting that. I like AJ Johnson. I like, Chris Livingston, Andre Jackson Jr. I actually really liked Ryan Rollins coming out the draft. Seems like I was wrong on that one. But they are extremely old with no real young player to be excited about, which brings me to Bobby Portis, the only player on this team besides Giannis that might have positive trade value. Even Dame, I'm not even sure what Dame would get you in today's market, but Bobby Portis, right? I understand he's a big part of the team. I understand the spacing. I understand he's a fan favorite, but he might be the only way this team can get someone that's young, and might be here for the long run for this team. So when I bring up Moses Moody, it doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound great at all. But some people out there believe Moses Moody is a starting shooting guard in the NBA. And if you could trade Bobby Portis for the starting shooting guard for the next 4 to 5 years with Giannis, again, you probably don't believe that about Moody. I'm not here to convince you about Moody. I'm talking about the premise of the situation. So get that point. And you might be taking a slight step backwards right now, considering Bobby Portis is a very good NBA player. And I know that sounds crazy to be taking a slight step back in the middle of Giannis's prime, right? But they don't have a lot of options, is my whole point. So maybe you don't like Moody, Looney in a first round pick. I understand if you don't like that, even though I'm not sure how big of it is a downgrade, you know, because Bobby Portis is very good, but Moody would really help that team. Kevon Looney is a very good backup center. Despite what happened last year, I still believe in Loon. And you get a first round pick, and the Bucks don't really have picks right now. So I think that's a decent deal. I understand why Bucks fans would disagree. Not saying they should do it, just throwing it out there as an option. And real quick, we'll run through a couple more Bobby Portis potential trades. The Sacramento Kings. Maybe you don't like Moody. Maybe you are a big fan of Devin Carter. Maybe you're a big fan of Devin Carter. Now, we know it was rumored at the draft the Kings tried to trade 13 for Alex Caruso. They tried to do that. I would say Bobby Portis, same level player, same, you know, range of player. Say you can get Kevin Huerter and Devin Carter for Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton. Is that a step back? Sure. But maybe you really believe in Devin Carter, and they don't have a lot of avenues to get players like that. So I'm just wondering what this team is going to do to get better, and how good are they actually going to be this year with Chris Middleton coming off of 2 ankle surgeries, Brook Lopez another year older, Dame another year older. I don't have a lot of faith in this team. But then you remember Giannis is in his prime and just had the best year of his career. What if you got Malik Monk and Devin Carter? Now, Kings probably wouldn't do that, but Bucks fans, would you do that deal? I don't know. I'm just keeping my eye on this team because, you know, something has to happen soon. These guys are about to be done. So, like, what's the next move? What's the pivot for them to try to keep Giannis? Next up, we're going to talk about my favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm tired of talking about the Pels, tired of talking about the Brandon Ingram situation, but you can't deny this team is pretty fascinating. If you look at the collection of talent in DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, that team sounds like an amazing team. But then you consider 2 of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, and Herb Jones. 2 of those guys are probably not going to start and or finish games. If they choose to run a real center lineup, which I think they are, that means DeJounte Murray, Zion, and Daniel Tice are locked. They're locked in. DeJounte Murray starting, he's closing. That's why they brought him in. They felt like they needed a point guard to handle those situations. So DeJounte's locked. That leaves CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and Brandon Ingram. 2 of those guys not closing. Does that sound like a viable, tenable situation? That sounds like something that will be affecting the locker room all season. It would be different, right, if B.I. was paid, if Trey Murphy was already paid. Nah, these guys are, in a way, competing for that money. And I don't say that in a malicious way. I don't think there's any ill will. I think all these guys love each other, but it is human nature. You know, people are going to be frustrated. Brandon Ingram on an expiring deal, not closing games, and we think it's just going to be fine. And let's even say they do go Zion at the 5 to close games. Well, somebody's still getting left out. If Zion's at the 5, that tells me Herb Jones is in the game because you need more defense. So now we got DeJounte locked in, Zion locked in, Herb Jones locked in. That leaves CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram. If I'm coaching the game, I don't know. I have Zion, I have Herb, I have DeJounte. If I'm coaching the Pelicans, I need to have Trey Murphy in that lineup. I need to have one of the best shooters in the NBA in that lineup. That leaves CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram, which brings us exactly back to where we started. CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson. There's no need for all those guys to be on the court. And Brandon Ingram's probably going to be the one gone, although it appears they have not been able to move Brandon Ingram. So to me, the Pelicans are definitely one of the more fascinating teams in the NBA, and how is this going to play out? Next up is the Indiana Pacers, who had one of the more fascinating seasons last year. You know, it started with the crazy Tyrese Halliburton run, was an all-NBA first-team guy, like a legitimate MVP candidate first couple months, and then he had the injury. They fell off a little bit, then they traded for Pascal Siakam. Bennedict Mathurin gets hurt. All of a sudden, Andrew Nembhard is a starter. They make it to the conference finals, but Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt. So Nembhard takes off, and now we have to gauge, was that the real Andrew Nembhard? And if that was the real Andrew Nembhard, what does that mean for Bennedict Mathurin going forward? What does that mean for TJ McConnell going forward? Because if Andrew Nembhard can replicate what he did in the playoffs, not necessarily what he did in the Boston series, but just what he did in the playoffs, right? If he can do that all season long, all of a sudden that opens up a lot of trade possibilities, because let's just say you put TJ McConnell, Bennedict Mathurin, and Obi Toppin. I understand you guys probably love Obi Toppin, but he's another salary guy that, you know, would make a lot of trades work. You put those three guys together in a trade, you get $30 million in salary. And now you can possibly go get that final piece to make you a real title contender. $30 million can get you Brandon Ingram. $30 million can get you Michael Porter Jr. $30 million can get you Jeremy Grant. To me, all those guys would make the Pacers significantly better, and I'm not even a big fan of Jeremy Grant, but for the Pacers, and all I had to do was give up Mathurin, McConnell, and Obi Toppin, I would do that if I really believe in Andrew Nembhard, which they do, considering they just paid him. So to me, that makes this team even more fascinating, because they have another move they can make. Now, maybe Aaron Nesmith is that guy. Maybe next year, Aaron Nesmith, we consider him a better player than Jeremy Grant. Maybe that's the case, but to me, you need someone just a little bit better than him in that role, and you can have a real title contender. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's that guy for sure. So, but a lineup of Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Jeremy Grant, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner. Come on, bro. That's a championship contender in my eyes. And again, I'm not the Jeremy Grant guy, but I feel like in that team, perfect fit. All right, we got two more. This one is the Houston Rockets, a fairly obvious one. You got the whole Jalen Green versus Şengün, and how do those guys, you know, figure it out together? I would love to say that's nonsense. I would love to say that people are overreacting, but we've seen what we've seen. Now, how do they look like that together? And then you also have Jabari Smith Jr. What if he's just a 5? What does that mean? But to me, the more pressing issue, because just pay Jalen Green. If it doesn't work out, you'll figure it out later. Just pay him now, and it is what it is, right? But to me, the more pressing issue is the wings, right? You have Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson. Is Jae'Sean Tate still on his team? And you have Dylan Brooks. All those guys cannot play. They can't. But the problem is, even if they make a trade, it would almost have to be a trade for picks, right? Because you're not going to bring in another center to play. You got to play Jabari at the 5 sometimes, so you need him to get those backup 5 minutes. You're not going to bring in another guard per se. You want Jalen Green to have the ball in his hands. You want Reed Shepherd to have the ball in his hands, so you wouldn't be bringing in another guard. So it's almost like you'd have to trade these guys for future picks, which is fine for this team. And then what about Fred VanVleet, who's on pretty much an expiring deal? Are they going to find a team to take $42 million for him? Because I highly doubt they're going to accept that team option and bring him back for another year at $42 million, or it might go down a little bit, but still, there's really no point in them accepting that option. So is there a Fred VanVleet deal that could really shake up the NBA? Actually, that's very fascinating, because he's a player that, you know, might be able to change some title odds. I'm not sure. Maybe that's overstepping, but maybe. And I just thought of a crazy Fred VanVleet trade, but I don't want to say it right now. Just stay tuned on the channel, because we're going to talk about that very soon. Last team is the Chicago Bulls, where, again, every time you think about this team, you forget Zach LaVine is on this team. But they have Josh Giddey. I'm a bigger fan of Giddey, or a bigger believer in Giddey than most people. I understand if you don't believe in Giddey, that's fine, right? But this team is fascinating because they do have Josh Giddey, they have Kobe White, they have Zach LaVine, they have Ayo. All those guys aren't going to be able to get the ball, though Zach LaVine will probably be hurt at some point. Not saying that to be funny, just probably going to happen. But someone like Ayo, who had kind of a breakout year last year, is not going to have that opportunity. You have Patrick Williams. People have been saying for years that DeRozan was the one holding back Patrick Williams. So now he has that opportunity, but also Modest Buzelis is right there as well. Modest Buzelis is the type of guy that will take that opportunity more than Patrick Williams has shown to be that guy. Like, even if Modest Buzelis was playing with DeMar DeRozan, he was going to make his impact felt on the game in a way that Patrick Williams didn't. So just a lot of stuff going on with this team, but I actually kind of like this team. I still like Dalen Terry. I hope he gets a chance. Vucevic is still here. I think Billy Donovan's actually not, terrible as a coach. There's a lot to like about this team. I'm just not sure which direction they're trying to go in. Well, we know which direction they're trying to go in, but they couldn't find a trade partner for DeMar DeRozan. But the backcourt of Giddey and Kobe White is a pretty damn good fit, in my opinion. Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Modest Buzelis, and Vucevic as a starting five. I'm not sure that's going to be the starting five. Well, it's not because Zach LaVine's still there, but to me, that lineup is extremely fun. And if I was a Bulls fan, I'd be excited to watch that lineup. You just have the whole Zach LaVine cloud over that team. So again, fascinating. Those were the most fascinating NBA teams this year, in my opinion. You got other teams you could talk about. The Sacramento Kings with DeMar DeRozan. How does that work out? San Antonio with Chris Paul and Wemby. Is Wemby just going to be a top 5 player in the NBA this year? That wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. I don't think many people are excited to watch this team, but I find the Clippers fascinating what's going on there. So a lot of teams, let me know in the comments down below which teams you find to be the most fascinating in the NBA for this upcoming season. Keep showing support on the channel. You guys been killing it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a like, please comment, please subscribe. I'm out. Peace.